Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Alchemical Mindset. Welcome to the Ascension. Welcome to your growth in your divinity. Let's take a deep breath in and fill ourselves with that energetic breath of life and release it all, letting go of all our earthly attachments. So as many of you know, we are an ascending beings. We are not this body. Those who hold on to the body remain stuck in this environment, never able to ascend to the highest levels of understanding, to meet the spiritual plane on the spiritual plane while still existing on this physical plane, preparing yourselves to move beyond where you are. Because of that lack, many can't see the world around them for what it really is. So in my meditation last night, I thought about this change that we're going through right now. And yes, the world is changing, and many people see the change only in the effect of people will wear masks and people will keep themselves at social distancing, and people will delve into the conspiracy theories, and people will find reasons to separate themselves and hate one another, or to dull their mind and dull their senses by endless watching of televisions, Netflixing, and watching the totality of funny but foolishness on TikToks and YouTubes and things of that nature, not realizing that a bigger plan is at play, not understanding the history of the power brokers and how in every opportunity that they have to keep you from ascending, it is taken. We do not have to go far back in history to gain this understanding. And it is not always the same process, but the process remains similar. Go back and research, go back and look, and you will see that prior to World War I, people were discovering the ancient writings of the Sumerians. They were discovering the ancient writings of the Babylonians. They were discovering the Eastern philosophies of the Tao. They were discovering ways of looking at their inner self. They were discovering the Hermetics of Egypt and the Nubians. They were discovering self. They were discovering that there was no ritual nor rule that prevented them from being able to ascend their divinity to the heavens. They were taking away from the establishment, and by doing so, taking away from the power brokers. This causes the power brokers to look for something to distract the people. So World War I distracted the people. Truly think the death of one monarch of a small, lesser important country of the day, creating World War I. The people were distracted. The people went off into war. The people became nationalist. And so the ascension ended. But what was discovered that during that time frame, people still were growing. People went right back into their ascension mode. And what followed suit? Not many years later, World War II. Sure, there were people out there that the society cast aside and said, you are of the devil, you are evil, you are this, you are that. There were people who were writing books like Napoleon Hill, that the world said, yes, as long as you're talking about money, this is great. But as soon as you start talking about the transmutation of energy, when you start talking about the laws that are of mentalism and the law of cause and effect, as soon as you take people back to the Hermetics, back to the ancient way of understanding, the golden mindset, the teachings of alchemy, the moment you start teaching these things. World War II must happen to distract the people and take them away. But after World War II, it was a realization that we cannot keep taking people into massive major wars. So the greatest generation, as they are called, were refocused into factories and industrialization. Whereas the woman had become a vital part of industry, now had to be put back into her place of the homemaker, of less importance. When the soldiers return home, the women must return back to the household. Stop their development. Do not allow them to grow. Do not allow them to ascend. Do not allow them to think. This is not proper. Allow them only to become educated to teach their children or to be teachers in school. But anything beyond that, let's stop the woman and maintain our patriarchal society. This worked for a while. We had the 50s of urban sprawl and white picket fences. Jim Crow lived and was abundant in the South. So what happened? Well, the 60s came. LSD, the opening of the mind. People began to express and explore themselves again. So war was thought to be started again, since the Korean War was a good distraction while Americans, it kept them in their place. Let's start this Vietnam War. We must prevent communism from its spread. We must scare you into hiding in bunkers and whatnot. But with the advent of the 60s and opening and freeing of the mind and understanding free love, this could not be. This could not be. But a war wasn't enough. Vietnam didn't have the same effect that the Korean War, nor World War I or World War II had. If anything, Vietnam continued people to find more ways of expressing themselves and diving deeper into their inner divinity. So something else had to be in place. We were successful in regulating the people through drugs. Yes, alcohol prohibition didn't work, but drugs did. Making marijuana, cocaine, heroin, the devil, the tool of the enemy, that worked. Let's dive deeper. Let's bring crack into the situation. And although we know it will run rampant through all cultures, we're going to focus the attention on the minority so that the majority won't notice that it is also affecting them, that their families are also being broken. So let's use drugs. And this was good. It worked. It kept people from truly ascending once again. But here comes the 90s. And this war on drugs is not necessarily working as well. We see that the generation that has come after that, it's not truly affected in the same manner. There is more crime and we're putting people in jail, but we are overpopulating our jail systems. Even though the private prison industrial system is making plenty of money, it is still more of a detriment to the power brokers than it is a benefit. So what is it that we can use? Well, what was recognized is that from the 80s into the 90s, the fear of a disease, a pandemic of AIDS and HIV, caused people to live in terror, to live in fear, to have people's focus caught into just trying to stay alive in this body, kept them away from understanding that they are not the body. That anytime you hold on to the body, you are pretty much being blasphemous to the divine spirit, to the consciousness of elevation, of adaptation, of becoming an adept. So let's scare them with diseases. Let's scare them with HIV. Let's scare them with SARS. Let's scare them with H1N1. Let's create an environment where they are afraid to breathe. They are afraid to communicate with one another. They are afraid to commune in nature with one another. Let's create an environment where they hide, where we control them by keeping them inside. But as we do this, let's also develop a system, a process to distract them with the trivial. Let's keep them locked in on the trivials of Facebook. Let's shut down anything that may open their mind. Let's get rid of the bookstores, because we know that if you crack open a book, you crack open your mind. Let's take them away from the bookstores. Let's get rid of the libraries. Let's have them call everything pseudo, so that the only real science, the only real scholarship is the ones that we dictate. Let's take it back so that it appears to be exactly as the time of old, when information was controlled by the state and the church. That information is not in the hands of the people. Things got out of hand. Things got way out of hand. They discovered the Hermetics again. They discovered Eastern ways of peace and understanding. They discovered how to control the ego and control the emotion. They discovered how to maintain peace and happiness and prosperity without having to strive to gain the biggest house and the biggest car, and how to have the most money. That they found happiness and peace and family, and they found their own inner divinity, that they were able to stand against the government and say that the people hold the power. You see, democracy in most people's eyes is looked upon as a great thing. But if we look at the history of man, the recorded history of man, we see that this idea of democracy, of the people having access to power and control, is fairly new. Do not be fooled by the stories you hear of the Greeks holding fast to democracy thousands of years ago. This was not the case. It was monarchy. Sure, the Roman had a senate, a republic that was ruled by an emperor. Countries had parliaments, but were ruled by kings and queens. If the king or queen or the emperor, the dictator, decided what the religion for that state was, that's what it became. If they decided what the economy was, that's what the economy became. The power brokers lost their methodology of power once democracy came into place, because the president lasted for 4 years and 4 years and 4 years, but then had to stop and only be 2 terms of 4 years. So a dictatorship by the people couldn't exist anymore, because the electoral college gave you the false sense that you actually chose the leader. The Congress and the Senate and parliaments and things of this nature gave people a false sense of control, because within that, although they elect people in and out, we must control the elections. We must control how many people can run. We must control who actually votes. Then we can control the policies, and by controlling the policies and controlling the educators and controlling the priests and the imams, then we control the people. So let us put them in fear through pandemics, because war will not work. War will not work in our society. So what can we do? How do we do it? What they face now is something that is beyond their control. Many call it the Age of Aquarius. And that is fine. It has been predicted biblically, through the Quran, through the Tao, through Nostradamus, through Merlin. It has been predicted by many, through the Egyptians, through the Mayans, of a new age beginning during this time frame. That no longer are we governed by the celestial of Pisces, but now governed by the celestial of Aquarius. And the pouring out of water, the giving of life, the pouring out of understanding. You see, the pouring out of water out of its container, out of what held it, out of what it was shaped into a free-flowing state, brings fear to the power brokers. Because now your mind is not captive in the pot, but is being poured out into a free flowing state. Your energy not kept in a pot, but in a free flowing state. Your divinity not kept in a pot, but in a free flowing state. A free flowing state that allows you to connect to your divinity, connect to the universe, to the energies around you in ways that is not controlled by the state, not controlled by the religious organizations, not controlled by the educational organizations. You see, in every process of freedom, there is methods that they try to utilize control. We have the freedom of the internet to pass on information, but within that, there are controls to keep you from accessing all the information. There are controls to put one against another to keep you in confusion. In order for us to truly ascend, we must recognize that this is all a facade. That your current way of living, your nationalism, is a facade. There are no borders. There are no nations. There are no kings, nor their presidents or parliaments. There are only systems of control. There are only matrices on top of matrices. And in order to escape that from this level to the next, is to recognize that you are not the body. You are not the gender. You are not the race. You are not the nation. You are none of those things. You are divinely connected to everyone. To release the body and dwell in your consciousness, to dwell in your spirit, is to let go of all these things that keep you captive in the body. The body strives to survive, whereas the consciousness, the divinity, strives to command and conquer. And not conquer in a way that means you take away from others, but conquer in a way that you begin to develop to a state where you mandate your universe. You mandate your energy. You mandate how you relate to everything. And although many will wait until it is over, till this fleshly body is dead and is done, it has ceased to be able to maintain the consciousness, many will wait to their funeral there before they realize this, not knowing that it's a current realization. It's a current realization. How I respond to a situation, how I relate to a situation, determines what that situation really is. Something can happen. I choose to be angry. I choose to be sad. I choose to be happy. I choose to be glad. I choose. You choose how you respond, relate to something. The more you practice you having that decision, you making that choice, the stronger you become, the higher you elevate. The less things worry you, the less things bother you, the less you are concerned about the body, the less you walk around in fear, the less you walk around in guilt and shame, the less you walk around afraid of losing love and losing loved ones, the less you see the lies that you tell yourself and you begin to live purely in truth, the less you will be blinded by the idea that we are all separated by all these labels that we place upon ourselves. Because the moment you label me, you negate me. So the less you feel that. And when you reach that level, you start to understand that these earthly attachments that I've been holding on to, these attachments that have governed my life, these attachments that have caused me to not move or to move, these attachments that have made me decide which way is left and which way is right, these attachments that has made me decide how I should be perceived or what other people think of me, or I should care about how other people think. The more you start reaching that level and releasing those attachments, then you start to truly live your life. You start to truly become one with the universe. You start to truly understand that no matter what happens, that this world can't touch me. This world can't do anything to me. Those power brokers cannot rule me. Those power brokers cannot control me, because I have superseded the power brokers. Because I do not measure things in money. I do not measure things in influence. I do not measure things in material items anymore. I measure things on my mental divinity. I measure things on my emotional divinity. I measure things on my total spiritual divinity. Once you are measuring things and see things and living on the fullness of your spiritual divinity, then you are truly ascending. Then you are moving to the higher realms. And in that higher realm, you see things, you live things, you be things totally different. You are different. You are something that is amazing. So it is my desire for you to achieve that, as much as it is my desire for me to achieve it. As we continue to grow and develop, I look forward in being with you during this journey. So good journey, good vibrations. Remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable.